Good morning, everyone. My name is Padmaja Satyamurthy. I'm the Technology Director of Skoll Foundation. In this session on Illuminating Data's Dark Side, we'll hear from a great set of diverse speakers who are asking the questions and finding the answers about the power of data doing good. This session will be moderated by Emily Courey Pryor, founding and Executive Director of Data2X, an organization that promotes the acceleration and use of gender data for advancing gender equality. Please feel free to read more about Emily at Skoll.org. Have a great session, Emily.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for that introduction. It's wonderful to be here for this panel. As we think about this conversation that we're going to have today, there are so many advantages and opportunities for acceleration that new data technologies give to us. Everything from, making grocery shopping easier to picking the perfect book to read on a long commute to many, many other social benefits, of course. But there are also several risks. Several of you in this room are aware of those risks, and I think that's why you're here at this panel this morning. There are risks in terms of the engagement of communities in developing new data technologies in the first place. There are also risks, and this is top of mind for some, in terms of the transparency of how data is used about people and what they know about how that data is being used. But we are people who like to be solution-oriented, and so the opportunity that we have is to convene a group of amazing thinkers and doers in this room and virtually to acknowledge these risks, look them in their face, in their virtual face, and do something about it as a community. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. But before we do that, I'm going to use an example of an area where there have been historical gaps, but where I think there's also a lot of promise and advancement for the future. Maybe. It should work. Technical difficulties. Well, I can just talk from this slide. As our introducer said, I run Data2X. We are focused on gender data, and we are working with partners to both advance the understanding that people have about what gender data is, why there are gaps, to accelerate the production of gender data. We work with partners, a wide variety of partners, with UN agencies, with governments, with international institutions, to close data gaps. And we do this by not only working on those technical data gaps, but also how we derive insights from those data and how we then use that data for long-term policy change. It's not advancing. Okay. So before I talk about data sources, so data sources and where we get our data from in the first place are a big generation when we're talking about data production. This is where a lot of these issues of bias that we care very much in the gender equality space, this is where issues of bias come in. But before I talk too much about bias, let me just say a few things by what I mean about gender data. I don't want to assume that everyone's on the same page. So I mean about three different things. One is sexist aggregation. So if we're only asking primary school enrollments of children overall, but we don't ask about boys and girls, and we won't really understand what the differences are and how to address them. Second is data that pertains specifically to women due to their biology, so collecting data on something like uterine cancer rates. And then third is the idea of data being collected about women that is in some way constrained by their social roles. So this might be the way that we might view in data collection women's economic roles and how those should play out, or how we and whether we collect data on intimate partner violence. But it's not really enough to just talk about data sources, and so we really have made a concerted effort to understand the full data value chain that exists here. So anywhere from production in terms of data sources all the way through to data use. And we did this with our partner, Open Data Watch. And it's not advancing again, but I will just say that I'm going to give two examples of how we get from bias in production and addressing bias in production to more effective data use. So on the data production side, I'll give you two examples. One is on a traditional source of data. So on labor force surveys, now it's going wild on me. So one is on labor force data. So the way that labor force surveys work is that there are certain questions, and historically there have been certain questions that have been asked a certain way. So something like, what is your primary occupation? And historically for men, this was a pretty straightforward question. For women, however, their economic lives are often more complicated and intersect with their household and their household responsibilities, whether that's childcare or work on a family farm. And so as a result, because of the way that questions were being asked, you were not getting responses that actually represented women's full economic lives. If you start to change the way and the bias and the production side of how you ask those questions, and then you use that information to derive actionable insights for policymakers, and then you then take that data and apply it to decision making at the policy level, you could end up having a pretty amazing impact long term in terms of women's economic production. There's also various examples that I could give on the big data side that I won't due to time. We're doing a lot of work on this issue on addressing big data for gender. There's lots of projects that I would love to tell you all about. But just in closing, I would say that we as a global community, and I'm sure a lot of you have been following the work on the Sustainable Development Goals, we all agreed on 17 different goals that we wanted to do to protect planet and people and to promote prosperity. Within those goals, gender equality and women's empowerment is absolutely paramount. The world statisticians agreed on 53 indicators to track whether or not we are achieving progress on gender equality. We have a baseline for 10. So our work is cut out for us, but the good news is that we have great people doing great partnership work. I hope that all of you will join us, so let's roll up our sleeves and hitch up our skirts. And now I'm going to turn to our wonderful panel to illuminate even more opportunities for data in the future.